This is my review of the Valkyrie Mark 3.5 slalom truck. I bought the 49-degree front truck with the fixed 15-degree rear truck. And stock, this comes with an 87A fat cone crank bushing in the front truck and a 96A tall barrel and a 93A tall barrel in the rear truck, both of which are also crank. Since then, I've mixed up the bushings. We'll get into that in a second. I bought these trucks with funds from Patreon. So to my patrons, thank you so much. This was a really cool thing to review, and I'm sure you guys enjoyed some of the exclusive first reaction content I had over there. I'll talk more about Patreon at the end of the video, but I'm incredibly grateful. I otherwise probably would not have been able to review these trucks. So I'm stoked, super stoked, and I sold it back to the patrons for a steal, $300 for this pair of trucks. That $300 is just going to go into the next truck review, so it's a good situation we've got over there. Now, I've partnered with Riptide for the next couple truck reviews to tell you how I would set up these trucks with their products. They sent me out a range of bushings, WFB, APS, and crank. And I tested a ton of bushings in these trucks and found that crank is absolutely the way to go. It's no surprise that Valkyrie includes crank bushings in these trucks from the factory. The high rebound formula of the crank has a couple benefits. A, these trucks with their coplanar bushing seat and just oodles and infinite amounts of lean, the high rebound crank formula helps them correct and come back to center really easily, really quickly. So I find them to be more stable over chunder and more reactive, kind of in and out of turns. I just like the way that they corner better. And then also, especially in the front truck, crank bushings are really good under preload, and you can drastically change the way the bushing feels by just giving the kingpin nut a couple turns tighter or looser. Crank, more than any other bushing I've tried, is reactive to that. So it's kind of like having 4 bushings in one if you just, kind of change the amount of compression on the bushing, and you don't have to risk damaging the bushing. This is something that you don't want to do with your APS or your WFB bushings or your Venom bushings while we're talking about it. Over cranking, I guess that's where the name comes from. Over tightening your bushings can cause long-term deformation of the bushings, just ruin the performance and the feel of your trucks. But crank, you can actually do that. You can get away with it. So I really liked it on this truck. I can really change how much center I have on the truck, especially with the fat cone bushings. But yeah, right now I have the 87A crank barrel in the front truck. This is not the fat cone. I went with this because I want a little bit more lean, a little bit less return to center, and a little bit less of a strong center, so I can really easily dive into tuck leans. This just better suits the race style skating that I wanted to do. And in the back truck, I have standard height 96A barrels. Now, that's pretty interesting if you know about Valkyrie trucks, because Valkyrie trucks use tall bushings. And you might be able to see I 3D printed some tall bushing adapters so that I can use standard height barrels in these trucks without throwing off the geometry. This was a recommendation straight from Valkyrie. I DM'd them and said, hey, I'm struggling with grip in my rear truck. What do you suggest I do? What bushing should I try? And they said, have you tried standard height bushings in there? A lot of their team riders apparently are also having this issue. The back truck just doesn't want to hold a line through a tight corner. I found it to be pretty frustrating out of the box skating these trucks. The back truck wanted to slide and slide and slide. And when I was really gunning for good racing lines, especially on a road with a lot of tight hairpins, I had a really hard time holding a good line. So fortunately, these standard height bushings worked. Not only did I experience more grip, I experienced just more control in general, less wobbles, and I felt like diving into the corner, I had to do less of the arm wavy balance type of thing, and I was able to just sink down into the trucks and take a very reliable, predictable line through the corner, and I was able to easily tell when they were going to break out of traction. That's something I didn't experience with the tall bushings. The tall bushings were just a little bit too vague, a little bit too numb. But the thing that I did like about the tall bushings is that they had a nice, forgiving kick out and a really floaty feeling in the slides. And that's what I enjoyed for free ride. So if you're going to do free ride on these trucks, put a Riptide fat cone in the front. I used 87A, but from your skate where I bought these, it also came with a 90A crank fat cone. And double 96A crank tall barrels in the rear truck. I really like this. It felt like the rear truck had, a nice easy kick out into slides. It wasn't fighting me for grip like a lot of my race trucks do, but I still benefited from the agile, nimble nose that this incredibly precise front truck uses. Real quick, I wanted to do the YouTuber thing and tell you to like and subscribe. The numbers helps us out a lot. It, makes the channel look better, that we're reaching more people so that companies want to send out products so I can review newer, hotter gear without having to dig as deep into my wallet. We all know longboarding gear can get really expensive, especially when you consume wheels the way that I do in the summer. So yeah, I'm pulling these out just to tease what we've got going on ahead. I post videos once a month, sometimes 2 times a month if I'm feeling excited and have the extra time. So summer's gonna have a lot of dope wheel reviews, and the Zealous truck review is gonna be coming out in probably a month too. So stay on the lookout for that, subscribe so it hits your inbox, and like the video. It just helps out a lot. Thank you. Now I needed to stop the mood lighting and flip the camera around so I could show you these DIY wheel bite blockers. This is a 95A Venom HPF insert bushing in the back truck. And then the front truck is just some over-engineered thing of my own design. You really don't need to do that. All you need to do is just put an insert bushing in there, Riptide core or a Venom insert. Yeah, they're really effective at what they do. I know Valkyrie sells wheel bite blockers on their website. You don't gotta do that. You could just take a normal bushing that you have, take some old hard bushing, chop it in half with some razor blades, and there you go. I recommend using harder bushings rather than softer bushings. It's not because of any sort of wheel bite related reason, but just because I find that harder bushings tend to have a tighter fit on the kingpin, and that prevents them from sliding down. But yeah, you can even do this on your Valkyries that are not the slalom Valks. I know somebody that did them on just their standard downhill Valkyries and had a lot of success. So if you do this, let me know what you think. Give it a try. Super easy to do, super cheap to do. Again, you can just, use a nice sharp razor blade, cut your hard bushing in half, and boom, no more wheel bite. I wanted to take a second to explain what Valkyrie means by a coplanar bushing seat, and I've included this time lapse of me modeling a gross version of a Valkyrie hanger to demonstrate this. Coplanar bushing seat just means that the bottom and top of the roadside and boardside bushings, respectively, are on the same plane. This allows the bushings to compress very linearly, and it prevents the bushings from needing to slide against the bushing seat, against the surface of the truck during the lean. This means that there's a lot less friction generated. The bushings kind of retain some more of their rebound, and they don't have to compress as far to get as much turning. One of the downsides of using a truck like a Rogue truck that has a big insert bushing is that the boardside and roadside bushings are far apart from one another. What this does is it means that the bushing has to slide a lot against the surface of the truck. And you'll notice that the rogue slalom trucks have an open bushing seat. That's because the bushings have to slide so much in order to engage the same amount of lean that you could get on a Valkyrie with very little friction at all. This is why the Valkyries are able to lean so deeply. I've heard people use the coplanar bushing seat as an explanation for why Valkyrie trucks are precision trucks, or that's how they stop slop or things like that. That's not at all true. Valkyries are still basically as sloppy as a Paris truck because all they use is the walls of the bushing seat in order to prevent the truck from kind of moving out of alignment side to side when under a side load like braking or turning. Without something like an insert bushing or a spherical bearing or some other thing to keep the geometry in line, Valkyries have the same precision as a precision Paris truck. The coplanar bushing sheet just allows the trucks to lean a little bit cleaner and with less resistance, which makes Valkyries feel unique. This is pretty revolutionary design for any truck, but especially for Valkyrie, who has been using this coplanar bushing seat design for ages now. This front truck, the pivot axis is defined by the two pivot cups. These are 2 points that define the axis that the truck rotates around. And for that reason, it has virtually no slop. Any slop induced in these trucks just comes from the compression of the 96A WFB urethane in the pivot cups. An interesting thing to note is that these two pivot cups, once broken in, give a lot of resistance to the truck. And this isn't a rebound kind of resistance like you get with a bushing. You know, when you press a bushing, it springs back. When you have these pivot cups giving resistance, it's a frictional resistance. It's like a damper. So it sucks away energy from the lean and the return. And it's just a lot more pronounced than I've experienced with other trucks. When these trucks are brand new and these WFB bushings are all lubed up, WFB kind of naturally just has a lot of oil embedded in it, which makes it a great formula for pivot cups. The truck glides left and right. It leans so much. But after, I would say, 5 sessions breaking these trucks in, they felt like they tightened up suddenly, and I had to drop down a hardness in my front truck of bushing because I was just getting so much additional resistance from the pivot cups. I don't think anything is out of line. Nothing's necessarily wrong with it. I don't think that damping from friction is a bad thing in trucks. In fact, these trucks can kind of benefit from a little bit of damping. Maybe they turn a little too freely, but it was surprising that transition from no resistance to a lot of resistance, at least double the resistance you would experience as a normal pivot cup breaks in a normal truck. I didn't buy the adjustable base plate for this back truck because A, I wanted to save a buck. The adjustable base plate adds another $50 or $75 to the overall cost. And B, the back truck has a much lower ride height than the front truck. The nice thing about this height discrepancy means that you can mess around with wedging these trucks and not be adding too much ride height to your overall setup. That's one of the downsides of using wedged risers, is that sometimes they can add a little too much ride height. And in my opinion, some ride height is good. I think it's interesting to mess with taller ride height. I made a whole video about risers on your downhill setups. Check that out. It's a little bit controversial, but the nice thing about the low rear truck is I can throw a fat 10-degree riser on there, bump this up to 25 degrees, get rid of the OG riser, and not have an unusual ride height that I have to accommodate by rising the front truck up. It's nice, and with the huge variety of Pat's risers that I already own, I have literally every degree increment of Pat's risers. It's pretty cool. It's really fun to mess with. I use them on a lot of my setups, and I use them on this to tune these trucks. I tried up to 20 degrees, but I did find that the 15 degree just kind of settled down this rear truck in a race style that I really enjoyed. I think kind of wedging up to a higher degree is kind of fun for free ride, but I wouldn't necessarily do that unless I were trying a wheelbase longer than 21 inches. use whatever wheelbase you want and tune the turning radius of your trucks accordingly with some really cheap plastic wedged risers. I have a link to Pat's risers in the description. I am sponsored by them. This is biased, but wedged risers are just a really good thing to have in your toolkit anyway. Now, I did try the trend of using the front truck with a back truck from a different brand. Now, I first saw this from Mitch Thompson. He got a set of these Valkyrie trucks and used them with his 2020 Rojas in the back. Then I saw Tiago Lesa do it with Ronin in the back truck. And then I saw Evandro, I think it's Dornelles. He uses his front with a don't trip downhill Simon rear. And that's exactly what I tested. I actually competed on a couple races with that setup, and it was really, really good. I didn't feel like having trucks from two different brands was really strange. It didn't feel like I was riding two different boards at the same time. It probably also helped that the front truck has 5 degrees of rake and the don't trip downhill Simons also boast 5 degrees of rake. So there wasn't some weird like turning discrepancy. I actually don't know if using higher rake in the back truck would cause some weird like performance characteristics. Usually you see a lower rake truck in the back. Yeah, it's good. The front truck is an extremely valid replacement in your race setups if for some reason you need a new front truck. I know the 2020 Rogues, they've got an issue where the front kingpin goes loose, and getting Rogues customer support to send you a new base plate can be quite the hassle. So throwing one of these on is a really cool option. Yeah, this is a really, really good, capable race truck. I wish it had a narrower option, if I'm being honest. 115 to 125 is pretty good for, you know, most race setups and free ride, but if we're pairing them with more modern race trucks, we're seeing trucks go down to 100 millimeters, even less than 100 millimeters. I would like to see Valkyrie come out with one more option of this truck, like a 105 to 115. Yeah, I think 115 to 125 is just a little bit big, and it feels crazy to say that. And not once did I ever feel like, man, I wish this truck were narrower. But if you are going to buy this independently and pair it with a different style race back truck, yeah, I just want to get the narrower option, be as competitive as possible, put as much pressure on the outer lips of my wheels as I can. So when I bought these from Urskate, a couple things surprised me. First of all, they don't have the like bushing seat inserts that they advertised when the truck came out. When these trucks came out, they said that there were these little metal inserts that you can put that changes the shape of the bushing seat and changes the way that the bushing is loaded in turns. You can kind of change if it's more restrictive or more flowy and free. That's gone. That's not here anymore. I don't know why they made that decision. Probably because you can just change that with bushings anyway. And there's enough bushing shapes out there that you don't have to worry about, you know, changing the style of your bushing seat. You can just buy a different bushing. So it's probably just an unnecessary manufacturing cost. Also, buying from Urskate, in my package were 2 extra bolts. These bolts on the front pivot arm are apparently wear items, or at least that's what's implied to me by giving me extras. You know, they are pretty standard, I think, like brass bolts here, and they have these preload washers on there. So washers that aren't completely flat. Once you tighten them, they give a little bit of, you know, compressive resistance against the bolt to hold it in place, prevent it from loosening with vibration. And the fact that they gave me extras is just weird. I don't know if that's because people are going to lose this. You know, you take these trucks apart at a skate event in the middle of nowhere in Washington, aka Maryhill, and you lose this shiny gold bolt in the kind of, you know, dust covered or dust colored grass. And then all of a sudden you can't skate your truck anymore. Maybe that's why they have extras. But really that indication is that this will wear out if you change it enough. If you mess around with the front truck enough, you're gonna have to replace these bolts completely. And I don't really like that. I wish there was a different solution. Now, to change the bushing, you don't have to take this pivot arm off. It's only if you want to replace the pivot cups, which is good. A characteristic that makes these stand out from a lot of other slalom race trucks these days is that the back truck has a lot of clearance for coring wheels. Now, it is the middle of winter here. I didn't core any wheels on these trucks. It's harder to core wheels in the cold because the urethane doesn't want to heat up as much and disintegrate, blah, blah, blah. Also, sliding wheels doesn't feel as good, so I'm more inclined to do race style skating in the winter. That's what I really like. But just from looking at it, the way that this roadside bushing is offset from the axle and down a little bit just means that if you're the kind of person that likes to free ride on little trucks, you're going to be able to get a lot closer to your cores than you would be on like your gold 2020 Rogues, for example. Those trucks are so frustrating because as soon as your wheels are like 68 millimeters, you can't skate them anymore unless you want to do irreparable damage to your kingpin. So it's pretty cool that you can core wheels on this. It's another thumbs up in the direction of this truck pairing being a really good modern freeride truck. Something that was originally surprising, and then as I thought about it and as I tested these trucks was not as surprising, is that these are really popular in the LDP and cruising scenes. I guess not so much cruising, but just LDP. These trucks pump like hell, and they feel really comfy while you do it. This front truck doesn't become more sloppy when you use softer bushings. So you can throw in really, really soft bushings, really free flowing bushings in the front truck and get such a smooth pump without needing spherical bearings that are going to get messed up in the rain, or, you know, spherical bearings have that metal on metal contact. They can be uncomfortable, and LDPers are going to be encountering a ton of different terrains on their skates. So the advantages of having a truck that has virtually no slop and the hanger is suspended on urethane means you're going to get a lot better vibration damping without sacrificing any of the agility or precision of the truck. And the back truck being such a low degree means that it's also really easy to pump off of. It leans super deep and it's also floating on all urethane. So for cruising around town, which I did, this is a really surprisingly comfortable truck to do it on. Now, I'm not much of an LDP or I'm not much of a cruiser, so I'm not going to speak to it too intensely about how to pump these trucks or whatever. But, you know, I do some distance pushes every now and then. I've got Corey Wolf in my hometown, Pantheon team rider. She hosts weekly long distance pushing events, and they're super fun to attend. If you're anywhere near Cincinnati, Ohio, come hit me up at Owen Campbell 777 on Instagram, and I can put you in touch and come skate with us. It's a really, really cool thing that we've got going. Follow Social Push Cincy on Instagram. That's all Corey, by the way. I don't take credit for any of that. Now we're gonna wrap this up with kind of a bang. I've already sold these trucks. I don't want to continue skating these trucks for a couple reasons. I really dislike the imbalance between the performance of the front truck and the performance of the rear truck. They're just optimized to do completely different things. I would much rather skate my Don't Trip downhill Seibens because at least I can tune them to be good at free ride in the front and the rear truck, or good at racing in the front and the rear truck. A lot of adjustability there. The front truck can be a great race truck and it can be a good free ride truck, but the rear truck can only be a mediocre race truck. And it's a decent free ride truck if you like the kind of floaty feeling that Valkyries give you. And also, I don't want to just keep the front truck just for race stuff because, I don't know, I don't want to have an odd number of trucks. That just feels weird. So I'd rather sell the combo. I've already sold them to somebody on Patreon for $300. I like to give the patrons a deal on used gear over there. I also just sold the Harry Clark board for $65. So yeah, that money just gets pumped into future gear reviews. I've got my eyes on the new calibers. But yeah, these trucks weren't right for me, but maybe they're right for you. Maybe you want a really agile truck to do stand-up free ride on, and that way I'd point you in this direction. Maybe you want a solo front truck to replace a truck that you're not pleased with, a truck that's going to give you a lot more lean and a lot more variation in the way that the truck feels without sacrificing any of the slop. So maybe you're the right customer for that. I'm not the right customer for that. I'd rather, sell these, get some different trucks to try out anyway, and see if I can finally replace my downhill Sybens, which I just love so much. They're good trucks. If you have any experience with these trucks or past versions of the Valkyries, let me know. I always want to hear it. And if you think that the back truck and the front truck are a good racing combo and that I'm completely wrong, I want to hear that too. Of course, you're going to see people win races on these trucks because they're still good trucks. And a lot of racing comes from your skill as a rider and not necessarily the gear that you're on. So I still expect to see these perform well out in the world. But if you want the top of the top of the top, the pinnacle, front truck is almost there and the back truck just can't keep up. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you especially to my patrons. If you're interested in the Patreon, I've got about 6 hours of content up there. First reactions to gear, kind of chit chats about what's on my mind, photos, videos, podcasts, race recaps, event recaps, just real casual stuff that's not polished enough for YouTube or short enough for Instagram. So go check that out. I've got some cool rewards over there. A lot of 3D printed stuff I designed. But with that, I want to say I appreciate all of you. I'm always going to put my best content here on YouTube, and I hope you have a wonderful day.